in today's video, I want to talk all about pushing through that messy middle when it comes to art creation. I know that for a lot of us, when we're just getting started with a brand new drawing or painting medium, or we're just getting started on our art journeys, we're still lacking that experience, that knowledge, that confidence, and it's very easy for us to start doubting ourselves when we really are just in the beginning of that art making process. We haven't gone through that creative process enough to know that it's normal for that artwork to look like that at that point in the process. And I see this happen all the time with students, with community members, with people reaching out via social media or via email asking me questions. They get started with a brand new piece with tons of inspiration, motivation, super happy. They visualize the final piece in their heads, and all of a sudden, halfway through the process, or even a third of the way through the process, they start getting very discouraged. Things are not working out as easily as they expected them to, and the doubt starts creeping in. And you just start thinking of whether or not you should even keep going, keep pushing through, or just leave that piece be and maybe even throw it in the garbage can. Because this is such a common struggle for so many artists out there, I wanted to create a video today sharing why it's so important for artists to get comfortable with that messy middle. And I'm also going to be providing you some key pointers for you to consider along the way, not to avoid that messy middle, because it's honestly part of the process. But I'm going to provide you some key pointers for you to consider so that you can actually have a greater understanding. You can come to a conclusion as to whether you're on the right path and you should keep going, or whether you should consider restarting the piece, or indeed just letting it go and stopping altogether. All right, so first and foremost, it's incredibly important for you to know that unless you're working on some sort of arts and crafts, paint by numbers, mandala, mosaic, kind of very organized type A artworks, that kind of thing, you're always going to start with a sort of mess, okay? And it's not even going to look like what it is that you are drawing or painting. So something that I would highly recommend is either looking on YouTube or learning about fine artists. It doesn't really matter what painting medium, whether it's watercolor, acrylics, or oils, or even what subject. I want you to look for fine artists' entire drawing or painting processes, and I want you to really look at those beginning stages, the entire first third of the process or the entire first half of the process. And you're going to notice that if the artist is a portrait artist, the drawing or the painting doesn't even look like the person that they are drawing or painting yet. It looks like shapes and different values that the person or the artist is developing. If the artist is like a landscape artist, all it is throughout that entire first third of the process is a combination of like abstract little shapes. Things are just starting to take form, okay? Because in the beginning, what we're doing is we're covering up the canvas. In the case of acrylic or oil painting, we're starting to work from general and make our way towards specifics. Even when it comes to watercolor painting, same thing. In those beginning stages, a lot of the times we're using a lot of wet on wet. Things are looser and very abstract, and they don't start taking shape and getting more details added in until after those base layers have been created, so that we can have a nice contrast between loose wet on wet effects and lost edges, even with more defined details and things like that. So it's just essential first and foremost for you to understand that that messiness is part of the process. It doesn't mean that something is going wrong. It's actually part of the process. What was that quote from Fight Club? If you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. Success requires a mess. As artists, it's important to keep that in mind at both the micro and the macro level. So what I mean by this is with every single piece is a journey in and of itself that requires a bit of a mess in order to arrive at that final outcome. But also at a macro level, our entire artist journey, it requires a bit of a mess of stepping out of our comfort zone and getting comfortable with that discomfort, with making mistakes, because that's how we learn, that's how we expand, and that's how we get to know ourselves as artists and our own way of doing things. We have to be comfortable with that mess, with being imperfect within each single art making process, as well as with our journey at a macro level, because that is how we're going to make deeper progress in our journey if we're willing to go through that mess. Progress comes through taking action and not giving up and being okay with imperfection. We're not going for perfect, we're going for progress with every single piece that we create. Moving on to 3 main reasons that I came up with that this negativity, this heaviness, this frustration, this wanting to give up, to get up and rip your drawing or your painting and throw it away into the garbage can, why this happens in my opinion. And along with these reasons, I'm going to be providing 3 key tips, one with each, in order to help you stop getting to that deep negative place that makes you want to give up. So again, these are not tips for you to avoid that messiness, because as I said, that messiness is normal. We want that. You want to get comfortable with that part of the process. All right, so reason number 1 why these intense negative feelings come up, this wanting to give up when we run into a messy phase of the process, is because the person is just getting started with a brand new drawing or painting medium. They are lacking that confidence, they're very insecure, they're doubtful, and they haven't taken time to do enough research as to what the process really entails. The tip that goes along with this is make sure that you are taking time to see what an artist's process with that particular medium/subject looks like. And make sure that you're fully acknowledging that beginning phase. Take notes, learn from it, and make sure that you're noticing how messy it looks and the different steps that the artist is going through before getting to the final part of the process. You have to make sure that you're acknowledging that so that you can know that you're on the right track, that it's normal for your artwork to look like that at that part of the process. If you don't know that that is what the artwork should look like, then it's obviously gonna be super easy. If you're already being doubtful of yourself, it's gonna be very easy for you to think that you're doing something wrong and that you should be throwing it away. Along with this, of course, it's very advisable that if you're just getting started with any new drawing or painting medium, that you follow step-by-step tutorials in which the artist is letting you into the entire process, especially when the artist is narrating the tutorial or sharing his or her thoughts with you along the way, so that you can fully understand what it is that the artist is doing and why it is that they are going about it in that way. Instead of finding a finished piece online, a painting, drawing, illustration, whatever it is, and trying to sit down and replicate that, really delve deeper into the process, especially when you found an artist whose style you like, you know specifically what kind of subject you want to improve on. Delve deeper into videos created by that artist or invest in courses provided by that artist, etc. Delve deeper into that process, because you're going to know exactly what happens from start to finish as opposed to just trying to copy something that you find online. You don't know the process that the artist went through, and it's very easy to think that things should be looking super neat since the beginning because you're just seeing that final piece. Take notes, do research, really acknowledge the different parts of the process that led to that final piece. Reason number 2 why we tend to run into this very negative, frustrating place in the art making process is because we don't go in with any sort of strategy. This is incredibly, incredibly important. It's not only going to make your art making process go a lot more smoothly, but you're gonna be much more likely to arrive at a better final outcome. When you don't go in with any sort of strategy, it's very likely that you're gonna start making mistakes because you're working willy-nilly. And those mistakes start getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point that they're very, very difficult to fix or cover up or incorporate as part of the piece. Whereas if you go in with a basic strategy, it doesn't have to be anything complicated, but at least make sure that you're taking time to think of a few key things before getting started that are gonna help you just have a better understanding of how you're gonna be moving along throughout the process to arrive at the effects and the outcome that you are looking for. And yes, things are bound to happen along the way. We all have accidents, unexpected things come up, and you're gonna have to veer away from that path for a few minutes or maybe a few hours, depending on what it is that you're doing. Use your critical thinking skills to fix that, but then you can come back to that strategy, that base strategy that you had set for yourself. Before getting started with any new piece, unless it's a smaller sketch, quicker sketch that I am working on in my sketchbook, something like that, I always take at least 10 to 15 minutes asking myself a few questions, planning a few things, sometimes even doing drills in preparation for the piece on hand. If I'm working on a pen and ink sketch, I am thinking of what particular alternative shading techniques am I going to be using? How many layers am I planning on going in with? How am I going to be creating a line weight variation all throughout my piece? If I am working on a graphite sketch, I ask myself, what different pencil grades am I going to be using? How many different layers of graphite am I going to be adding in? If I'm working on a watercolor piece or any sort of painting, I always make sure to plan and prepare my different colors, checking on color mixtures, whether the colors are going to work well together. I also ask myself, what specific techniques am I going to be using along the painting process? For example, when it comes to using watercolor, am I going to be using wet on wet or wet on dry? Am I going to be overlapping wet on dry on top of wet on wet layers? You know, all that kind of stuff that is going to help me get a better understanding of how I'm going to be moving through the drawing or the painting process, what specific tools and techniques I'm going to be using along the way, etc. Third reason why we tend to run into this kind of very negative situation is because we started losing focus along the art making process. So if you have done your preparation, if you've done at least a little bit of research, you've set your strategy and all of that, then along the way, if you are tired, if you start getting anxious, you start to lose focus, you start to work too fast, right? You start making mistakes. If you stop looking at your reference photo, you stop thinking of the strategy that you had set for yourself, you start losing focus of that path that you had created for yourself. You start to work willy-nilly and accidents happen, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger because you keep pushing yourself. The way to fix this, I would say, is to stop what you're doing whenever you're starting to feel anxious. You notice that you're starting to work too fast because you just want to finish the piece. You're starting to get tired, frustrated, whatever it is. The best thing to do in those cases, in my opinion, is to stop, rest, Come back to it later, come back to it the next day once you have a fresh set of eyes and you're well rested and you're ready to focus in on that strategy once again. Those are the 3 key points that I wanted to share with you today. Try pushing through at least 80% of the work that you start, okay? Because if you don't, you are going to leave tons of work unfinished. And if you don't push through, you're probably not going to get as much experience and practice and knowledge that you could gain if you pushed through. And if you incorporate these 3 key points that I just shared with you into your art making process, then you're gonna get a lot out of each single drawing or painting process that you go through. And it's a lot more likely that you'll actually avoid that very heavy negative place and push through, be able to complete your pieces. So for me, the only 2 instances in which I decide not to finish the piece is when I've arrived at a certain point in the process at which things are just not going the way that I wanted them to. I don't like the look of my drawing or painting, and I just know that it's easier to stop and start all over again than to continue pushing through. And B, and this happens very, very rarely at this point in my journey, but when I am just not interested in the subject anymore, as I was when I was brainstorming and planning for that particular project, and I just feel that overall it's gonna be a waste of time because I wanna focus my time and attention on this other thing that I have way more interest in, that's another instance in which perhaps I let it go and leave that unfinished. But aside from those situations, I continue pushing through, even if I feel that the final outcome is not going to be the way that I initially envisioned it. At this point in my journey, I know that it's normal for me to arrive at pieces that are not 100% perfect or not even 100% to my liking. Honestly, 70% of the work that I create is gonna be kind of meh. I know that I'm gonna be super happy and proud of a few pieces, and that I'm gonna be kind of meh with another set of pieces, and that there are also going to be a few pieces that I just didn't like at all. I just embrace this as part of the journey because I know that if that 70% of the meh and the bad work wasn't there and I wasn't okay with going through that, then the 20-30% of the work that I am really proud of, it would never have a chance to happen. If things don't turn out the way that you initially envisioned them, then who cares? It doesn't matter. Just stop and start again, or get started with a brand new piece, okay? That is completely up to you, but don't stop, and just know that messing up and meh pieces are all part of the growing journey. They're part of the artist's journey. All right, you guys, so that is it for today's video. I hope that this was helpful and encouraging for you. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Take good care and talk to you soon. Bye, guys.